She was bleeding into the snow. She was hungry enough to eat bark. She was freezing on a world that had forgotten the meaning of mercy. And when the human knelt beside her and whispered one forbidden word, beautiful, the entire galaxy tilted. The wind howled across the dead battlefield of Carthus 9, a frozen graveyard of broken alien warships and shattered machines. Ice buried metal like time trying to hide its own crimes. Nothing lived here anymore. Except two survivors who were never meant to meet. Elias Vaughn stumbled through the storm, dragging a crate of salvaged tech behind him. His beard was frozen solid. His gloves were torn. His oxygen recycler wheezed like an old dog. "Of course," he muttered. "Scanner says light snow. This is not light snow. This is aggressive snow." He almost walked past her. At first she looked like wreckage, black armor twisted, sparks leaking from cracked plates. Then the armor moved. A hand twitched. Elias froze. Every human knew the stories about the Arcthari Dominion. 7-foot warriors. Biotech armor fused to their bones. Conquerors of 12 systems. They did not surrender. They did not retreat. And they definitely did not lie bleeding in the snow. Her helmet was shattered. Violet blood steamed against white ice. One eye glowed faintly beneath frost. She saw him. Her voice came out low and sharp. "Human. Leave." Elias blinked. That's not usually how first contact goes. She tried to rise. Her body failed her. Systems in her suit flickered erratically. He should have left. The Arcthari fleet had burned Earth colonies 5 years ago. Humanity had barely survived the war. Officially, there was a ceasefire. Unofficially, everyone was waiting for round 2. But Elias didn't see a war machine. He saw someone dying alone. He stepped closer. She tried to raise a weapon. The plasma blade at her side sparked weakly and died. "Stay back," she growled. "Relax," he said gently, kneeling beside her. "If I wanted to hurt you, I'd have brought something bigger than duct tape." He pulled a small field medkit from his pack. Old. Scratched. Reliable. Her eyes narrowed. "Why?" "Because bleeding out in a snowstorm is a terrible way to go," he said. "Trust me. I've tested the theory." She stared at him like he was insane. He sprayed sealant foam along the crack in her armor. It hissed and expanded, stabilizing the rupture. Her body stiffened. "You aid your enemy," she whispered. Elias shrugged. "Maybe I'm tired of enemies." She studied him, thin, shivering, clearly fragile compared to her kind. Arcthari were raised for conquest. Their culture valued strength, dominance, fear. Humans confused them. They broke easily. Yet they kept coming back. Her breathing slowed as the medfoam bonded. He leaned back slightly and, without thinking, said the word. "Beautiful." Silence swallowed the storm. Her body locked. Arcthari language had no translation for that word. They had words for power, for lethal efficiency, for superior genetics. But not that. Her pupils widened. "You insult me?" she asked quietly. He blinked. "What?" "No." He gestured awkwardly. "Your eyes. They're incredible. Like nebula light." No one had ever spoken to her like that. Not commanders. Not brood leaders. Not rivals. Arcthari warriors were praised for brutality. Never for beauty. The concept hit her harder than any weapon. Something shifted behind her gaze. For the first time since she crashed, she stopped seeing him as prey. "You are foolish," she said, but her voice lacked venom. "Professionally," he replied. He helped lift her. Step by step, they moved toward the wreck of an old cargo shuttle half buried in ice. His shelter. Barely functioning. Inside, heaters flickered weakly. She sat against the wall, scanning the interior. Primitive. Chaotic. Creative. Human. "You survive here alone?" she asked. "Yep," Elias said proudly. "Me and my terrible decisions." He handed her a thermal ration pack. She hesitated. Arcthari did not accept charity. Her stomach growled anyway. He didn't comment. She took it. Outside, the storm intensified. Inside, two former enemies sat in uneasy quiet. Then her suit pulsed red. Long-range scan ping. She froze. That frequency, she whispered. Elias stiffened. What? My fleet. He swallowed. Arcthari fleets did not search for survivors. They eliminated witnesses. They will glass this sector, she said calmly. No survivors. Elias let out a slow breath. Well, he said lightly, that's inconvenient. She stared at him. You do not understand. They will detect you. Probably. You will die. Eventually. Her eye twitched. Human, this is not humor. No, he said softly. It's strategy. She blinked. He stood and walked toward a pile of scrap electronics. What are you doing? She demanded. He grinned. Human thing. He began rewiring components, pulling circuits from broken drones, splicing power lines with strips of metallic ration wrapper. You cannot fight a fleet, she said. Good thing I'm not planning to. He activated a small device. A distorted signal burst into the atmosphere. Her suit registered it. She stiffened. That is Arcthari command encryption. Modified, he corrected. Her breathing quickened. You altered it. Yep. You cannot break Dominion encryption. He smirked. Didn't break it. He hit another switch. Her visor flared. A false signal echoed across orbit. Arcthari fleet scanners received it instantly. A distress command. Top-tier authorization. In her own genetic command code. Her eyes widened in horror. You cloned my signal. Tweaked it, he said. Close enough to trigger a retrieval protocol. Above the clouds, Arcthari ships shifted formation. Confusion rippled through command channels. Instead of glassing the surface, they prepared extraction teams. She stared at him. You manipulated my fleet. Just nudged them. She rose slowly. You could have let them kill me. Yeah, he said. She studied him again. You are weak. Fragile. Outnumbered. He met her gaze calmly. Yep. And yet you interfere with a galactic superpower. He shrugged. Welcome to humanity. For the first time in her life, the Arcthari warrior felt something unfamiliar. Not dominance. Not rage. Something like awe. Outside, enemy ships descended. Inside the wrecked shuttle, a freezing human stood smiling at impossible odds. And for the first time, she wondered something dangerous. If this was how humans survived, what would happen if they ever decided to stop surviving and start winning? The first thunder wasn't weather. It was engines. High above Carthus 9, the Arcthari fleet slid through the clouds like a row of black knives. Their ships were silent predators, built for fear. Blue light pulsed under their hulls as scanners swept the ice plains. Inside the broken shuttle, Elias watched the sky through a cracked viewport. His stomach tightened, but his hands stayed steady. He kept moving, tightening a wire, tapping a panel, checking the signal loop. The Arcthari warrior, Viella Kaur, stood rigid beside the door. Her armor still sparked, but her posture had returned. Pain lived in her body like a second skeleton, yet her eyes were clear. They will land near this signal, Viella said. Elias nodded. That's the point. You are luring them. More like, inviting them to the wrong party. Viella's jaw tightened. They will recognize deception. Elias snorted softly. They will recognize their own arrogance. That's stronger than any sensor. A low, deep whine rolled over the snowfields as the first drop craft pierced the storm. It hovered, then lowered like a falling monument. Its ramps opened. Shapes moved in the white haze. Arcthari retrieval troopers, heavy, disciplined, covered in angular armor that looked grown rather than manufactured. Elias's heart kicked hard. Viola's hand hovered near her dead plasma blade. "You cannot fight them," she said. "I'm not going to," Elias whispered. "I'm going to make them fight themselves." The troopers advanced in 2 lines, rifles raised, boots crunching snow like bones. Their leader carried a staff device with a glowing crown, an authority marker. Viola stiffened. "That one is a hound captain. He commands extraction and silence." "Silence," Elias murmured. "They do not rescue survivors," Viola said flatly. "They collect what matters, and erase what does not." Elias swallowed. "Good to know I'm classified as does not." The troopers stopped 20 meters from the shuttle. The hound captain raised his staff, and a speaker on his chest crackled. "Warrior Viola Corps," the voice boomed, cold and sure. "State your condition." Viola's throat moved. A lifetime of obedience pressed on her like gravity. The Dominion did not ask. It took. Elias looked at her, and for a moment his earlier word, beautiful, returned like a tiny flame in her chest. Not because it was romantic. Because it was human. Because it was a thing the Dominion did not control. She stepped forward into the doorway, letting the snow hit her face. "My condition is irrelevant," Viola said evenly. "State your intent." The hound captain paused. That pause was everything. Dominion troopers were trained for war, not conversation. They expected obedience. They expected fear. They did not expect a wounded warrior to question them. "Our intent is retrieval," he said, voice sharpening. "Approach for verification." Viola didn't move. Elias leaned close behind her, whispering so only she could hear. "Remember, they think you're alone. They think you're helpless. Let them keep believing that, but make them curious." Viola's eyes narrowed slightly. Then she lifted her chin and said, "Verify from there." The hound captain's pride flared through the speaker. "Do not test Dominion protocol." "Then do not test mine," Viola replied. Elias almost laughed. Almost. The troopers shifted. Weapons raised higher. The hound captain took 1 step forward, and Elias pressed a hidden switch. Far across the ice, behind a ridge of scrap metal, a small device blinked awake. It was not a bomb. Not a gun. Not even advanced. It was an old human mining beacon with its guts rewired. It screamed a signal into orbit. Not a distress call this time. A command. A command that said, "Dominion fire authorization, active. Ground team marked." Viola's suit translated the code instantly. Her eyes widened. The troopers' helmets lit up. For half a second, they froze like statues. Then the hound captain snapped his head upward, as if he could glare into the sky. "What is this?" he barked. Elias stepped forward into view, hands raised, as if surrendering. He looked small beside Viola, like a mechanic next to a war god. Snow clung to his hair. His suit was patched in 5 different colors of tape. "Hi," Elias called. "Welcome to Carthus 9. Please don't shoot. It's rude." Every rifle turned toward him instantly. Viola's muscles tensed, ready to strike, ready to die. The hound captain's voice dripped contempt. "Human. You are not authorized to speak." Elias smiled. "That's funny. I'm also not authorized to survive. Yet here we are." The hound captain stepped closer, staff humming. "Where is Viola Corps' biometric core?" Elias tilted his head. "You mean the thing you actually care about?" Viola's gaze snapped to Elias. Her suit core was a Dominion-grade data seed, battle records, code maps, genetic encryption. A treasure. The hound captain raised his staff. "You will hand it over. Now." Elias let his smile fade. "I can't," he said. "Because you refuse." "Because," Elias said carefully, "if I do, your fleet will kill you." The troopers hesitated again. Viola felt it. Tiny cracks in discipline. A ripple of doubt. She realized what Elias was doing. He wasn't just tricking machines. He was attacking the weakest part of the Dominion. Their certainty. The Hound Captain snapped, "Our fleet does not fire on marked retrieval." Elias nodded toward the sky. "You sure? Because my beacon says you're marked. And your fleet is listening to your own codes." The Hound Captain's staff flared brighter. "Lies." Elias lifted a small cracked tablet and flicked it on. A projection formed in the snow, a tactical overlay of the fleet. One ship shifted position. Then another. Viola's eyes widened. They weren't preparing to leave. They were lining up, as if for a strike. The Hound Captain's voice changed, sharp now, urgent. "Abort. Cancel mark. Now." Elias spread his hands. "I would love to. But here's the problem." He pointed at Viola's armor. "Your warrior's suit is broadcasting. It's broken. It's leaking identifiers. It's basically screaming, 'Here I am, here are my codes, please shoot me.' I patched it as best I could, but it's still noisy." Viola felt shame burn under her ribs. Dominion armor was sacred. A failure was disgrace. "And," Elias continued, "I may have amplified the wrong part." The Hound Captain's rifles snapped upward again. Viola took a step, ready to protect Elias. Then Elias did something that made no sense. He turned his back on the rifles and faced Viola. His voice went softer. "Do you trust me?" Viola's throat tightened. In her entire life, trust was a weapon used against the weak. Yet this human had knelt in the snow beside her, had sealed her wound, had spoken a word that broke her old world. She whispered, "I do not know." Elias nodded. "That's honest. I'll take it." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small metal disc, dented, scratched, human-made. He pressed it into Viola's palm. "What is this?" she asked. "A key," Elias said. "Not to a door. To a choice." The Hound Captain roared, "Enough!" He raised his staff to fire. Elias snapped his fingers. The disc in Viola's hand warmed, then hummed. Her suit flickered, then stabilized. A new channel opened, one Viola had never seen before. Not Dominion. Human. Elias spoke fast, eyes locked on hers. "That disc can hijack your suit's broadcast and rewrite the identity signature. We can make the fleet think you're someone else." Viola's eyes widened. "Impossible." Elias gave a grim smile. "For them. Not for us." The Hound Captain fired. A bolt of energy screamed toward Elias. And Viola moved. Fast. Not as a wounded survivor. As a warrior who had just been given something rarer than strength. A future. She slammed into Elias, knocking him aside as the blast tore through the shuttle wall and threw snow and metal into the air. The troopers surged forward. Above them, the fleet's targeting lights brightened. Viola heard the first warning tone, orbital weapons arming. Elias coughed, blood on his lip, eyes wild but focused. "Viola," he rasped, "we've got about 30 seconds before your people turn this place into glass." Viola looked at the humming disc in her hand. Then she looked at the troopers charging. Then at the sky. And for the first time in her life, she made a decision not because she was ordered, but because she chose. She grabbed Elias's arm. "Run," she said. Elias grinned through pain. "That's my favorite plan." They sprinted into the blizzard as the Dominion's own ships began to aim at their own soldiers, confused, triggered, obedient to their own corrupted codes. And somewhere inside that chaos, humanity's real weapon revealed itself. Not stronger ships. Not bigger guns. But the ability to turn an enemy's certainty into a trap. The sky turned white. Not from snow. From fire. Orbital cannons screamed through the clouds, beams of blue light stabbing down toward coordinates that no longer made sense. Dominion ships were firing on marked targets below, targets Elias had carefully, cleverly rewritten. The Arcthari fleet was attacking its own retrieval squad. On the ground, chaos exploded. Troopers scattered, shouting in clipped command tones. The Hound Captain barked override codes into his staff, but the fleet above answered only with automated precision. Dominion doctrine trusted encrypted systems more than field commanders. That was their strength. And their flaw. Elias and Viella ran through a canyon of twisted metal as plasma blasts vaporized snow behind them. Ice shattered. Wreckage flipped like toys under shockwaves. Elias stumbled, coughing, but kept moving. "You okay?" he shouted. Viella grabbed him by the collar and yanked him forward as a blast tore open the ridge where he had been standing a second earlier. "You are slow," she said. "You are terrifying," he replied. Above them, 3 Dominion ships began broadcasting emergency recalibration signals. Conflicting orders jammed fleet coordination. Targeting systems blinked uncertainly between ground squad identifiers and orbital command codes. Viella's breath was steady now. Not because she wasn't afraid. Because something inside her had shifted. For the first time, Dominion certainty looked fragile. They reached a half-buried cargo hull Elias had prepared earlier. He slid open a concealed hatch. Inside was not a shelter. It was a transmitter. Not human military issue. Civilian. Mining grade. Modified beyond recognition. Viella stared. "You planned this." Elias wiped blood from his mouth. "I planned options." The fleet above realigned again. One ship veered away, unsure of the targeting conflict. Another remained locked on the ground. "We have seconds," Viella said. Elias nodded and slammed his hand onto the console. The transmitter roared to life. Not a distress call. Not a Dominion command. A broadcast. On every open frequency. Human. Across nearby sectors, old human satellites and listening posts caught the signal. It carried Dominion encryption patterns. Fleet structure data. Weakness markers. Viella's eyes widened as she understood. "You are not alone on this world." "Nope," Elias said. "Never was." Hidden beneath ice fields and inside asteroid belts, small human vessels had been waiting. Not warships. Not large fleets. Observers. Scavengers. Listeners. Humanity had learned something during the war. You don't defeat a stronger enemy head-on. You learn how they think. Then you let them defeat themselves. The broadcast reached human command nodes across 3 systems. Analysts instantly recognized the patterns. Dominion fleet response times. Encryption reaction loops. Auto-fire trust chains. Every flaw Elias had triggered was now mapped. The Dominion fleet, confused by its own corrupted commands, began to reposition defensively. And that hesitation was everything. Far beyond the storm clouds, faint human engine signatures appeared at the edge of sensor range. Viella felt it before she saw it. "They are coming," she whispered. "Yep," Elias said. "But not to fight." Human ships dropped microsat drones into orbit. They didn't fire. They didn't challenge. They injected code. Dominion command nets, already destabilized by Elias's beacon manipulation, struggled to filter friend from threat. One by one, targeting systems blinked offline. Viella stared at the tactical projection. "You are dismantling them." Elias shook his head. "No. We're forcing them to choose." The Hound Captain's surviving troopers regrouped below. He transmitted a final override. Dominion doctrine demanded elimination of corrupted assets. Which meant orbital strike authorization escalated. Viella felt the command in her bones. Glass the surface. Destroy evidence. Destroy her. Destroy the human. She looked at Elias. He met her gaze. "Still trust me a little?" he asked quietly. She closed her eyes. All her life, strength meant domination. But this human species, they survived by connection, by risk, by impossible optimism. She opened her eyes and activated the disk Elias had given her. Her suit's broadcast changed. Not to Dominion. Not to human. Something new. A hybrid signal. Her voice carried on Fleet Command frequency. "Fleet of the Arcthari Dominion," she declared. The Hound Captain froze below. Orbital ships paused. "This is Warrior Viella Core. I am alive. Silence. Dominion protocol struggled with contradiction. She continued. The surface is compromised by faulty encryption cascade. I recommend withdrawal to preserve fleet integrity. Elias stared at her. That was not surrender. It was strategy. She was protecting her people from their own error, and saving the human ships from open war. The Dominion command net calculated risk. Corrupted code. Unknown intrusion. Fleet exposure. Then, slowly, the first capital ship powered down its weapons. Another followed. One by one, the fleet disengaged firing locks. The Hound captain screamed defiance over comms. But Dominion logic favored survival over pride. Within minutes, the massive warships began ascending. Not defeated, but uncertain. Viella watched them go. Her chest felt strange. Not victorious. Free. Elias leaned against the console, exhausted. Well, he said softly. That escalated. She turned to him. You could have destroyed us. Maybe, he said. But that would start another war. And you chose not to. He shrugged. Humans are stubborn. But we're tired of burning worlds. The last Dominion ship vanished into the clouds. Silence fell over Carthus 9. Snow drifted gently again, as if nothing had happened. Viella looked at Elias for a long moment. You called me beautiful, she said. He smiled faintly. Still true. She studied him. You are weak by every Dominion measure. Accurate. You lack superior strength. Superior weapons. Superior fleets. Also accurate. She stepped closer. But you possess something we do not. Elias tilted his head. Bad fashion sense. She almost smiled. Imagination. He blinked. Viella looked toward the sky. You saw flaws where we saw perfection. You saw choice where we saw orders. You saw beauty where we saw only function. Elias swallowed. That's just being human. She nodded slowly. That is why your species survives. Far above, human observation ships recorded Dominion retreat patterns. Analysts celebrated quietly. No victory parade. No fireworks. Just data. And hope. Viella deactivated her combat stance. What happens now? She asked. Elias looked across the endless white horizon. Now, he said. Now we build something better. She considered that. An Arcthari warrior standing beside a human engineer on a dead world that almost became a battlefield again. The galaxy had expected humanity to either surrender or retaliate. It had never expected them to innovate peace. Viella extended her hand. Not in dominance. In partnership. Elias hesitated only a second before taking it. Snow fell softly around them. And somewhere in the vastness of space, advanced civilizations recalculated something uncomfortable. Humans were not the strongest. Not the fastest. Not the most advanced. But they were the only species reckless enough to turn survival into strategy. And enemies into allies. And that made them something far more dangerous. Unpredictable. And unstoppable.